If you're a marketer that does cold email outreach, you know that recently there has been a new Google update to their Gmail product that has sent a lot more emails to spam. And in this video, I'm gonna be showing you exactly how you can avoid the worst of that update and what you can do to get higher deliverability rates for your outbound email. My name is Lucas James, and I am the creator of Agency Go.
All right, so before getting into how to solve this issue and how to avoid getting into the Google update spam trap, let's first identify what spam is. And so Send in Blue, which is a shared email relay, has a pretty good writing on what they consider spam. So I recommend checking out this page to see. But some of the things they talk about are having consent of your contacts, bot and script lists, partner opt-in, co-registration. You must be able to provide a proof of opt-in for each of your clients, all your marketing bulk emails, all your marketing SMS. Now, here's the thing. That is definitely the case, I would say, for any sort of consumer-based marketing. But from what I have understood for our email outreach, if you're reaching out to businesses and you're not necessarily spamming them, but you found their information on the internet and you're reaching out to them to basically inquire about potentially selling them services, usually, and this is something that you don't want to necessarily take my word 100% for, I've consulted with my legal team and gotten a pretty good understanding of what is, can spam law and everything like that. But from what I've got from them is that if it's a business, usually it doesn't apply in the same category as consumers. So the first thing right off the bat to just remember here is that if you're reaching out to consumers, that's a wildly different set of rules than businesses. Businesses typically, when you reach out to a business, it's a little bit different because they are they're in the business of doing business, so they're a little more open to having people reach out to them because they're probably doing the same thing to other people. So you have to be really strict about this stuff if you're reaching out to consumers. So just don't mess around with it. It's gonna really cause problems for your brand if you are targeting consumers and you're not following these rules. So definitely follow all of these and make sure, even with businesses, make sure you double check with your legal team to make sure that you're complying with all CAN spam regulation. Make sure also that you have an unsubscribe link. One thing you could do for unsubscribe when you're reaching out to businesses that I do is, instead of saying necessarily there's an unsubscribe link, I say, PS, if you don't want to hear from me again, just click this button or something like that. Which makes it a little bit easier for people to unsubscribe without me getting dinged on my email outreach for having unsubscribes. Because when senders look at your emails, they're looking at your unsubscribe rate. And you have to have a certain unsubscribe rate. And if you exceed that unsubscribe rate, then it's gonna ding your email. So you wanna avoid having that unsubscribe button in there, but you still need to give them a very clear and obvious opt-out, right? And so some of these things are not necessarily law, but more like guidance in terms of how the consent needs to be done. But again, this is super strict when you're reaching out to consumers. So don't try to sell consumers on things. Businesses are a little bit more lenient from what I personally understood. Maybe the law changes by the time you're listening to this. Maybe my legal team tells me that I have to focus on doing it a different way going forward. And if so, then obviously we'll handle it that way. But this thing is fluid. You have to be constantly on, you have to be constantly understanding what the rules and regulations are around CAN spam at all times if you're going to be successful as an email marketer. And then obviously you just need to avoid anything like this. I mean, don't do any of this. No hate speech, no materials containing violence against children. Obviously, this is all obviously prohibited. So don't even try getting into those areas. And then obviously all this other stuff is important too. I'm not going to go into this entire article. Point being is, make sure that you actually, before even considering fixing any of your problems, make sure that you actually are not sending spam, right? And that you're only emailing businesses and you're not emailing consumers. And if you are emailing consumers, that they're opted in consumers fully if it's, let's say, an e-commerce store or product, right? So that's the first thing before I even go into how to fix this. The second thing is, you want to use a tool like Glock Apps. It's super cheap, not sponsored by them. Just think it's a good tool. I use it myself to test to see how well your emails are hitting different inboxes. Now, the thing about this is you might think that 78% is kind of low. And in fact, it is. I mean, I would prefer to have it at 98%. But the fact of the matter is, when you're sending so many emails out to people on your email list or what have you, you're going to get some sent to spam. And this is a relatively new domain that I've warmed up. And I actually haven't ran this since January, but it's when I was running in January, it was just a brand new domain. So obviously my percentile is going to be lower than it is now. But when you look at tools like what I use, which is SendGrid, it actually shows you your deliverability rate, and it's about 98% for me, right? So it's way higher than this number, but 78%, 75-78% is the minimum you need to be hitting. And Glock Apps actually lets you run tests that allow you to see how good your emails are if they're hitting domains. So it's super cheap. I think it's like $1 per test or even less. I don't even know the exact amount. You just go to their pricing page, and I have 300 test credits because I'm on the subscription. So you could just use that as a reference. But this is a good example. And if you have a domain that's really warmed up, like ours, twiz.io, you get above 90% because that domain's been around for years, which is why we're able to do it. But the other thing to think about is if you're doing a warm-up campaign, which I recommend you do at all times, so that way your emails stay as consistent, you can see I'm sending out a lot of volume through agencygo.io email, right? But I have virtually no emails being sent to spam. I mean, yesterday I had 0 sent to spam. I sent 95 emails, right, on this domain. This is just my warm-up, right? And this signals to Google that I have a healthy domain that is getting emails sent back and forth. It's free to warm up your domains inside Gmass. And insofar as fixing any issues from the Google update, the first thing you need to do is see where you stand. And the way to do that is with Glock Apps. And then you need to see if when you're running a warm-up through your Gmass campaign, let's say, if you're doing it through Gmass, you could do it through Lemlist, Lemwarm. There's like a million warm-up tools, but I like Gmass because it's really robust, it's free, and it's easy to use. But if you're using something like Gmass to warm up your emails, then you need to make sure that if you're doing a warm-up campaign and they're sending and receiving emails on your behalf to warm it up, if this is all going to spam, then yeah, you're screwed, right? You need to fix that. And honestly, the biggest way to fix, the reason I even see people getting into issues with this new update, honestly, is because they did their domain on their they did all their email outreach on their main email, which is a big no-no. You should not be doing any cold email outreach on your main email. I don't do any cold email outreach on agencygo.io. This is just for my transactional email back and forth to my business and my clients and things like that. But I do Twiz Scales. I use that for podcast outreach. I use that for reaching out to agencies, right? Neil Patel Growth. You have bestvoipleads.com, right? So that's all alternate domains that I use for my business. Now, Sendinblue is the one I mentioned before, but the thing about Sendinblue is that it's a shared relay. So the best way to test to make sure that your emails are in the clear and that there's no problems is to essentially run it through a shared email relay, because Sendinblue has specific metrics, and I don't actually use Sendinblue anymore. I actually just use Gmass at the moment, which is why I don't have any data here. But Sendinblue has specific metrics that you need to hit in order to stay in compliance with their shared email relay, which basically means that if you are having any issues from the Google update, then if you run it through Sendinblue, you should not be able to send anything because they'll mark it as spam and they won't let you send anymore. So again, the first step is identifying it. The second step is to throw it into a warm-up tool, see where you stand and see if there's any way to fix it. And the third thing is to essentially, talk about or get another alternate domain if yours is not recoverable. And the only way yours is going to be recoverable is if you throw it into a warm-up tool, let it run for a couple weeks, see if it can get the warm-up score better. Make sure you're better in compliance with anti-spam policies, and then you should be good, right? But that's essentially a step-by-step breakdown of how to avoid this and how to avoid future updates. That's why I have not been affected by these updates, because I'm not even pushing the limits too much. I only send per email domain that I run, I at max send 50 emails per day, and I make sure it's always warm up. I don't believe in this bulk spam approach that a lot of people are taking with their email. It just doesn't work in the long run.